this week's episode of Weaponized.
The Federal Aviation Administration has now issued bans on flying drones in multiple cities across New Jersey, and I don't know what to make of the entire drone situation, because what I do know is that people defending our critical infrastructure contact some, I guess, aerodynamic craft drones that are coming over some of our sensitive installations. However, it is reported to me that they are filming non-aerodynamic, like really non-aerodynamic shaped objects.
You know, we've heard from pretty reliable people, Jeremy and I, that there have been all manner of mechanisms and systems that have been used and aimed at drones over different military bases, and none of them look warm. George, you've spoken about it, and it's the most controversial aspect of this, mimicry. And Eric Davis wrote an article about it, a paper about it for NIDS, talking about the Cash Landrum case, where he didn't believe they were actually helicopters, they were actually NHI mimicking helicopters.
I think the phenomenon for 80 plus years has been engaging in plausible deniability. Some people perceive this as just happenstance. Oh, it's just coincidental. Oh, it's just a propulsion system. But if you really look at the full array of UFO history, it seems to me that there's some kind of social engineering going on. It has been going on for decades.
There's internal communications, and there seems to be a tapering off. So it's as if it's just going to stop, and then we've been conditioned again, and then we're just going to wake up after the new year and be like, well, that was weird.
Secrets, cover-ups, and strange phenomena.
UFOs,
Guns, that was years ago. I'm not sure they're young guns anymore. What do you think?
yeah, look, it's always exciting to have these guys on. They really have voices in this community, and they kind of take very different perspectives. We're talking about Ryan from Post-Disclosure World.
Ryan Robbins,
Ryan
aka UFO Jesus, right?
UFO Jesus, and he's always got this really cool and very positive perspective. I like the way that he deals with conflict. We then also have Danny Silva from Silver Record.
He's kind of been quiet for the last year or so, by design. I think Danny, who's a good soul, a good observer of the topic, feels guilty when he comes down too hard on people, so he's just kind of resisted. He can't help but do that sometimes in UFO world, as you know. The third guy is Joe Merja, UFO Joe, who is a prolific writer, puts out these gigantic synopses and collections of material on different topics via X and Twitter. Really does some good in-depth work and catches a lot of grief, of course, because of it.
Yeah, well, you said to me the other day, like, he says it as he sees it, and he gets himself in trouble sometimes for saying it as he sees it, but I do appreciate that. It's very raw, straightforward, and you better remember what it is you said verbatim, because Joe's always in there getting your exact words, being like, this is what he said, and sometimes you gotta explain yourself further when you didn't want to.
Yeah. Ooh, did I say that? Really? Yeah, I know. Yeah, he holds your feet to the fire for sure. All three of them do, in different kinds of ways, you know. So we've been in contact with him for a long time. We have our own separate dialogue that goes on about different issues and controversies and personalities. But we thought this year may be a good time to bring him on and kind of recap what had happened in the past 12 months.
Yeah, I think that's great. So we're gonna have them on. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we saw happen go down in 2024 before they come on?
Yeah, I think we should sort of lay the groundwork for what you thought. What was the most significant development of 2024 in your mind?
I mean, there was a bunch, man, but I think for me and you, it was at the beginning of the year, 2024, we obtained and released what is now known as like the Jellyfish UAP, and that was a heavy lift to get that out. It took years for us to make sure that that was actual video. Like, we're not like digital experts, right? So it's like making sure that when we get obtain information, it takes us time to make sure that it is legitimate, that there's people that saw it on base. So the Jellyfish UAP, we released that. And what was interesting about that is that it was the first time that the world is seeing a designated UAP that is moving. It was actually a secret base within a base. It was in Iraq, and it was a CIA base. And there was an aerostep, which is something like hovers in the air, it's tethered, and it had this really cool thermal camera on. And you and I saw it. We're like, this is the weirdest UAP designated by our intelligence agencies, not by us. UAP footage we'd ever seen. It looked like a jellyfish. I'd heard about it, for decades, this idea that there was like this jellyfish UAP, we'd never seen anything like that. So that was kind of, for me, it was a cool moment in UAP history.
And it made a big splash. I mean, literally and figuratively made a splash in UFO world, hotly debated. I think, everybody tried pretty much everything to dismiss it. It's a glob of something. It's bird shit on the lens. It's balloons. The argument about whether there is actual footage that the public has not seen yet or not, that went on, and people tried to dismiss it all kinds of ways. It's not balloons. It's not bird poop. And it is a genuine UAP as determined by our military, not by us, correct?
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, we needed to get a lot of background on this, so I made sure numerous people that we were in contact with had seen it. One actually came forward after, saying, oh yeah, we called it the spaghetti monster on base. But yeah, it's not an artifact of the lens. It is not, if anybody has ever seen it, who has seen balloons through infrared, but if you've seen that before, it's absolutely not. The debunkers try to do that. It kind of looks like this, and they put this digital diagram together of balloons and how it could look. It's total nonsense. So there was more pushback than that, though. Look, at this base, they filmed this thing. It was the first time in the base's history that's known where a UAP is filmed or anything is filmed, and under armed escort, the client, who would have been CIA at the time, come in and they take under armed guard. They take the original footage, and additionally, they don't sign out for it. That was reported by multiple individuals who were aware of that case. But the thing is, it was piped in to the control center. So obviously, as it was piped in, there were people reporting that. And I think that's how that imagery sustained, even though they tried to clean it up. Now, what it is, well, the reason it struck a chord with me is because we became aware that at Pantex, that there was this, which is a nuclear armament and disarmament site, that there was something that almost identically looks like this object, and there is footage of that. You can't obtain that from a nuclear site. We could never put it out. But there is footage. I can testify to that. And that was back years before. So it's just really interesting that we got that out. The people tried to dismiss it so much, and it maintains itself as one of the greatest, in my eyes, pieces of footage of a UAP designated by our military.
Yeah, the attempts at debunking it were pretty funny sometimes. It's bird poop, but there have been analyses done of this thing, fossa, it rotates like this. It's not bird poop. It moves like that, and it moved through that base. People didn't see it. It was at nighttime. It is dark out there, and plus this thing is basically invisible, correct?
Yeah, well, that was the weird thing too. So when the footage went up from the aerostat and it went into the control center, they actually tasked a team of people with NVG's, night vision goggles, which is just infrared. It's kind of different than the thermal cameras, and they couldn't see it. They knew exactly where it was because it was being traced by the aerostat. Also, some of the operators at aerostat said it's the first time we couldn't log onto something. They didn't know if it was active jamming or what, but basically they couldn't target it except optically. And that's the first time they said we can shoot out an entire 23 miles going at speed, and this is the first time that we couldn't target it. So it was real mystery at the base. There might be more we'll learn about that. I hope so. As I said before, there with that, but I do know it to be absolutely fictitious, and that's very disappointing. It's disappointing because our jobs as journalists are to inform the public about matters that we are for the public good, and to attack something fictitiously like that, there's got to be a reason. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
Well, it seemed to me one possible guess that you and I kicked around in private was that maybe somebody was trying to goad us into reaching out to people that they can help us obtain information. And then people can figure out if they're watching on phones or email, they can figure out who we're talking to about this and identify them because they don't know who helped us get this information. So if that was the case, that was pretty devious. The larger question is the role of error. You know, that was one of the biggest stories in my mind of 2024 is the error in February of this year.
There are police reports that has missed everything.
It was a shoddy report full of typos, full of obvious historical errors about key cases, and it seemed to have been rushed out the door so that John Kirkpatrick, the outgoing head of Arrow, could go ahead and give the interviews that were totally polished to the UFO topic. There's nothing to it. There's no evidence of ETs, which he did over and over again for months. And by the end of the year, Arrow's attitude had changed quite a bit. A new guy in charge, Kozlowski, who is, again, he says, we got a lot of information, we've dismissed hundreds of these cases, but there are some that we cannot explain, for which we have a lot of really interesting information. We can't figure out the engineering or the physics of how these things move, which was a refreshing change from how the year began. The whole attitude expressed by Kirkpatrick in so many of these interviews that he gave this year, I hope is something we can get into with the young guns, but that Arrow, the change in attitude at Arrow, I think was important. And then, in reference to what you had to say about what its mission was, you know, the year before, Arrow had said, look, come one, come all you whistleblowers, we want to hear from you. Tell us the evidence you got. If you saw these things while you're on the inside, if you're working with Cosmic projects, we want to hear about it. They invite all these people in, they take the testimony, they record this stuff, and then they dismissed it magically with a wave of their hand as if they didn't believe any of it. All those witnesses who came forward, putting their careers, their appearances in risk, and felt like they had been totally duped. Was it a counterintelligence operation? Was that the purpose of this, is to invite people in and find out where the leaks are, where the risks are? What do you think?
Yeah, man, I think this is extremely dangerous. And I'm glad we're talking about this right before we bring our guests on, because I've noticed something. You know, the entrepreneurs, white marshals, trying to get everybody to be their beach strong. Yes, that was the mission of the JR, and I even talked about that. But this is like Operation Blue Box. They're trying to like pretend that you can go to Arrow, there won't be penalties. That's false. I know that. They're also saying that they're going to take this seriously. Well, the problem they have is that you and I have been reported to by a lot of these whistleblowers before they went to Arrow. So when they come back to us and they say, this is how we were treated, this is what happened, they never mentioned the stuff that we reported to them, or they told us to shut up, can't talk to Congress unless you have a subpoena. I think it's extremely dangerous to give any merit or credit to Arrow now moving forward just because they have a new director. You can see this person managed by the people around him in the senatorial hearing. It's not even a hearing. They're not on an oath, and they're not asking the overt and covert threats that are going on to some of these people, and it's really messed up. So I just want to put it out there that if we see people come forward in 2024, which I know we will, I hope to see more, that their protection is to really be loud to get out there, because we are tracking the shenanigans.
There's some other things coming in 2025. We'll talk about that on the other end. I think maybe we bring in our guests, our young guns panelists, and talk to them.
Yeah, we're super excited who they are. We'll give you one more time. Who's coming on, George?
Ryan Robbins, better known as AKA UFO Jesus, who finds goodwill on Earth, and humility among men and women in UFO world, which is hard to do. He always looks for the positive angle. UFO Joe Mercia, who writes these gigantic synopses and stories on X, and then Jenny Silva of the Silva Record, a great, always behind-the-scenes observer and analysis of motives and things of that sort. I think those guys are probably coming on right now. All right, young guns, not so young guns. Let's start it off. 2024, UFO Joe, what's the big story to you that jumps out? And there's some good and some not so good. So yeah, I was skeptical, even though I believe Jay Stratton came out and said that he did some work for the UAP task force. Good guy. I'm like, okay, that's encouraging. Recently, and this story may have gone under the radar a little bit. Right? Recently, James Fox said that he was in a skiff looking for a video related to a missile launch from 1962, I think it was. Not the Bob Jacobs launch, 64. Not the Bob Jacobs launch, but there's supposedly another missile launch video that has UFOs circling around it. So he was, I won't go into the details of that, but then he said he ran into Kozlowski. And Kozlowski said, if you're going to work at Arrow, James, it's mandatory that you watch the phenomenon. So that's encouraging, and he was excited about, Kozlowski was excited about the Roa case in Zimbabwe with the children. He said, oh yeah, all those children are saying the same thing. Very encouraging. But then he said, Kozlowski looked at him and said, James, I can't part my hair without the DOD's approval. And you can quote me on that. So that's pretty, it's encouraging to see the positivity and openness, but then he's willing to admit and tell Fox, you can share that. He's basically saying, everybody, listen, I can do whatever, I can try my best, but it's not coming out. Not coming out, so. I thought that was the overwhelming message of the Arrow report that came out in February. What I got out of that was, we're never going to come clean on this stuff. Maybe it was Kirkpatrick's imprint on Arrow at the time, but saying that we've explained all this stuff. The only reason why we can't debunk all cases is because some of them we don't have enough information, but there's no proof of ET's technology, no proof of ETs at all, and the whole thing is basically, according to him, a waste of time. That was the message coming. It's why they seemingly rushed that report so much with all the typos and historical errors, but the message from that to me was, we are never going to come clean on this. Is that how you guys saw it?
Yes, absolutely. And
Brian, why don't you jump in and tell us what your big story of the year was, or what jumps out at you first?
Well, just say that, there's rumors of Kirkpatrick had an advisory board. He won't come clean on it. It was claimed that Glenn Gaffney was the director of the CIA's Science and Technology, thwarted the transfer of non-human materials to OSAP. And what I find interesting is that Sean Kirkpatrick is still at it. I think an article dropped today in Scientific American where he just had to chime in about the drones. This guy just doesn't go away. It's like, I thought you were the head of Arrow for a confined period of time, but he can't help himself. He keeps coming out about, he keeps wanting to diminish and downplay the UFO phenomena. It's really bizarre. It's the optics are horrible. It makes him look guilty. It makes him look like he's part of a greater effort to diminish the UFO topic. It's like, I thought wasn't Arrow's charter to bring clarity about UFOs and have an honest approach to the topic? But this guy just doesn't go away. He keeps talking about UFOs and diminishing it every chance he gets. I mean, it's like right out of a movie script. beyond that, I'll just say that I think the story that's taking the media by storm, of course, is the drones. And to me, what you cannot ignore is how we're getting so many mixed messages by our officials. In fact, I captured this and I'd like to share. John Kirby recently said, and I quote, "Now there have been some drone sightings, I think, as you know, over some military bases. We're obviously looking at that, but that is a different category, and DoD has different authorities to deal with that." How is that a different category? Are these drones spontaneously emerging over these military bases? Don't they have to traverse a certain amount of distance to get to those military bases? It's not a different category. People might be seeing these drones on their way to the military bases that even Kirby finally admits is happening, but it's a different category. So I think the drone story right now has gotten the most coverage of all, so I guess that's the biggest story of the year.
Before we leave Kirkpatrick, just mentioning this is how thin-skinned he came across. These reactions he had on social media platforms, his own personal social media platforms, where he was reacting late at night to some slight that appears on X or on Facebook. How incredibly thin-skinned the guy was for the job that he had. Any thoughts on that?
I was, one of the things, and I know other people heard it too, before he even as soon as he took the position, somebody told me, they said, "Yeah, I know him, big time narcissist." And to see Kozlowski say, "My hands are tied," well, Kirkpatrick's hands were probably tied too, but the difference between the two is one of them is an arrogant prick, and we know who that is.
Danny Silva, what was your big story of the year?
The biggest story, I think, clearly was the drones. It's made it through mainstream media. It's made it all over the world. It's much bigger than the hearing was, than Constellation. That story, it was bigger than Lou's book. It just made it into the mainstream now. Some people may say that it's not a UFO story, but I would say it is. I think the UFO community can feel good that they've been ahead of the curve on this, whether there are UFOs present in New Jersey and in these other places. UFO community has been harping on this for, decades and decades. So we can't rule it out just because of all those claims from the years. Most of them obviously are misidentifications, and there are drones. There's probably hobbyist drones and then government drones, maybe all of the above. I really like people like you guys who are kind of saying, "I'm not exactly sure what's going on." I get a little turned off and scared a little bit when someone says they're sure, and we've seen a lot of that reporting where everyone is sure what's going on. That's kind of odd to me. But so that was the biggest story, and then the hearings were obviously big too, but nothing has hit like the drones have. I think Glenn Gaffney getting named was pretty interesting. Obviously that stayed in mostly in the UFO world, and some of these other stories we're talking about really didn't make it out of the UFO world. But the drones are big now, and especially with the new president coming in, they're going to have to deal with this, or they're going to look really bad.
Hey, Jeremy, I want to get you to chime in on this too. Arrow, I was told this, and I don't know if you've heard the same thing, but I was told that Arrow is not involved with studying these drones over the mass sightings that we're seeing, including over like Langley. They're not looking at it because, in their view, these are UAS, not UAP. How would you react to that if it in fact is confirmed that Arrow is not even looking at the drones?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of the entire drone situation, because what I do know is that people defending our critical infrastructure, contacts of mine, not sources, just contacts, people that I speak with that are on the ground, that are filming in FLIR, there are very prosaic, in one way, I guess, aerodynamic craft drones that are coming over some of our sensitive installations. However, it is reported to me that they are filming non-aerodynamic, like really non-aerodynamic shaped objects coming in and out of the water. So in that area in New Jersey particularly, before going over nuclear sites, things coming up out of the water with stationary cameras that are protecting those sites, really high quality, lifting up, coming out, hovering over the base, loitering for hours at a time. That's
Yeah, you're just
gotta
checking
be
in with
of
you
interest
downtown.
to Arrow if they're really looking at this, but we've already established there's something corrupt and rotten with Arrow. So I don't really know what that means, George, if they're studying it, not studying it. I just know that, haven't you guys heard, like, the thermal signatures of even the traditional drones or things that, they're size of SUVs, but the thermal signatures aren't quite right for normal propulsion. Have you guys, the guns, have you heard that in popular media?
I haven't heard that, but I like what James Fox said about Arrow. It's the All-Domain Resolution Office. What are they trying to do? They're trying to resolve events. So if there are drones that they can't figure out, I know that Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's on the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee, she recently spoke about the Langley 17-day incursion from December 2023, and she would know, right? She's on these committees. She's not someone to make stuff up. According to the people that have briefed her, radar wasn't even able to detect these UAPs. So I can see why Arrow has no interest in it, because they can't resolve it. That's not what they're about. So if they can't resolve it, they just don't really care about the drones.
I mean, the other thing I noticed, George, is there was a mayor that came forward, did this really long thread. I wonder if you guys have read about it, but it's Mayor Ryan Hurd, and he says the drone mystery they don't want you to solve. And if I summarize kind of what he said, was he was working with the governor. He's like, look, I have friends in the tech industry that deal with drones. They're bringing in all of these anti-drone technologies, which they've tried to deploy and have been ineffective. Somebody's like, well, you can't shoot these down over popular areas. We know they're going at least over the water, if not in and out, which I do know as a fact, but some of them are. But we've tried to deter these drones. The thing is, he went saying, you're trying to deter like Type 1 and Type 2 drones, like basically DJI small drones. That's like Ghostbusters and stuff. That's what they use, is like normal drones that could have payloads. These are large, I think they call them Type 3, Type 4 drones. So this mayor kind of went off. He's like, I gave the DoD the opportunity for us to bring in technology from a friend of mine and be able to assess and determine where they're coming from, point of origin, and we could take these down if necessary. These are technologies deployed overseas when we're in combat, and the FBI and also the DoD itself was just like, don't need your help. Now, why would they do that? So I'm so confused about this. Here's a mayor from the New Jersey area who's saying, I have a solution for you, and the DoD's like, no, don't need it. I just don't understand it.
The drone fear is real right now, and I'm noticing that even locally. Apparently there was an accident from hobby drones, or not even the hobby ones, the performance drones. I think it was in Florida where the two of them crashed, and someone got injured when they hit the ground. Dallas, where I'm from, or in the area, they've canceled their drone show on New Year's because they're worried about drones crashing and hitting the crowd. So this is a real fear that's going on, and these are performance drones, let alone government and mystery drones.
We've heard from pretty reliable people, Jeremy and I, that there have been all manner of mechanisms and systems that have been used and aimed at drones over different military bases, and none of them have worked. And if that's true, I mean, that's pretty scary. You get the UK bases, 3 or 4 of them, that were inundated with these things night after night, and then poof, they all went away. We were told by our colleague, Chris Sharp, that they threw everything in them that they had, and they couldn't bring them down. So whether or not it's a good idea to bring drones down, I think there's a legitimate point to be made there. You don't know where the debris is going to land, or they're going to bonk somebody in the head and cause a bunch of lawsuits. But at a minimum, if these things are undetectable over our military bases, places like Langley or Lincoln,
directly speak with, I'll just say critical infrastructure, they're kind of laughing because they're saying in the news, they're saying don't worry, there's no problem. Yet there's an organization with the energy in New Jersey, and they're begging the FAA to put up flight restrictions for national security. They initiated that. How many, like 22 different areas were put under flight restriction until middle of this month or middle of January. So it's so funny, they're saying in the news, don't worry, nothing's a threat. But all the protocols and everybody that is tasked with identifying and protecting these bases, they're begging the FAA to shut down the airspace. So there is a problem. This is a threat. It is a threat to have unidentified that large over any sensitive installation that would affect, like energy distribution or anything like that to the area. So it's just full of contradictions. Everything's full of contradictions. It's so frustrating.
Regarding a threat, so okay, these drones are not hovering over the White House shooting an energy beam and obliterating it like from Independence Day. They're not doing that. But they're over sensitive bases, nuclear power plants, things of that sort.
Yeah.
It seems to be some kind of surveillance operation where it's gathering information for whom, for what. It seems to be that could be interpreted as a threat. The next time they come back, they might be carrying biological weapons and spray that over the people in New Jersey. We don't know, but I would certainly think if I were in a military position, these things were over these sensitive bases like Langley 17 days in a row, I'd consider it a potential threat and be curious about who's flying them and want to bring them down. The other part that is interesting to me is all these small town mayors and county sheriffs in New Jersey who've never paid any attention to mystery objects in the sky, suddenly looking up and seeing these things. They're hearing from constituents, and they've never engaged in arguments in UFO world, but they're suddenly saying, hey, there's something weird in the sky, and they've gone to the government, and they've got the same treatment that we've all got from the federal government over the years. Nothing to see here, move along, folks, and they're kind of pissed off about it. I hope that someone is doing some mass sociological study of how the public reacts to unknown objects in the sky day after day, week after week. I'm kind of glad that the public hasn't panicked. They're very intrigued by the whole thing, and they're ticked off that the feds are not being honest with them and sharing it. It's a real life sociological study of something unfolding now, and we're doing pretty well. Humanity's doing pretty well with it.
Yeah, and I would say that I don't think the public believes what they're saying because it's so illogical and irrational. They're saying it's not a threat. Okay, so if I wake up in the morning and I notice muddy boot prints on my carpet, I could say, I have no evidence it's a threat. I'm going to eat my cereal and feel inner peace. It's like, no, there's muddy boot prints on my carpet. Are you out of your mind? I'm gonna have a conniption. But the national security apparatus is like, yeah, there's drones flying over installations, but we have no evidence it's not a threat. Yeah, you have no evidence it's not you have no evidence that it is a threat either because you don't have an answer. It could go either way, but at the same time, it's like, isn't surveillance inherently a threat, at least on some level, to national security? It's just pure gaslighting, and no one's really. The only people who are buying it maybe are the officials telling lies. I don't know. Maybe they talk themselves into it, but the public's not buying it because it's ridiculous.
I just think they have no other. If they really do not know what some of these objects are, you're not gonna get them to say, you know what, folks, these are a threat, because they'll do the last thing they want to do is freak people out. Whether it's China, Russia, or NHI, they're not going to admit it no matter what. I mean, could you imagine Kirby going on and saying, yeah, we don't know, and we're pretty worried that they may drop some anthrax on your house tonight? It's not going to say that. And one other thing, drones, George, you've spoken about it, and it's the most controversial aspect of this, mimicry. And Eric Davis wrote an article about it, a paper about it for NIDS, talking about the Cash Landrum case where he didn't believe they were actually helicopters, they were actually NHI mimicking helicopters. And I know that's really controversial and it makes us look really bad to discuss it. Oh, that you can use that as an excuse for anything. Oh, is that airplane a UFO? But it seems like that, you can't prove it, but John Keel wrote about it in his book 1970, Operation Trojan Horse. They can take on any shape, form they want. If that's true, it'll be impossible for us to tell the difference between a real drone and a UAP. But I'm glad you did bring it up, and I know you've gotten a lot of flack for it, but it's the most interesting aspect of the story for me.
I like to put, it comes with the territory.
80 plus years has been engaging in plausible deniability. Some people perceive this as just happenstance. Oh, it's just coincidental. Oh, it's just a propulsion system. But if you really look at the full array of UFO history, it seems to me that there's some kind of social engineering going on. It has been going on for decades, where it's almost like a fine-tuning. And I know the skeptics are going to come after me for this, but it's almost like a fine-tuning. They want to reveal themselves to a certain extent so that it's in the zeitgeist. There's conversations about it. There's documentaries and books about it. There's mass sightings of many credible people seeing the same things, highly corroborated sightings going back decades. The government's as shady as all hell about it, right? They give the impression they're lying about the topic. Even though many skeptics will admit there is a cover-up, they'll say, well, it's just advanced technology. It's not UFOs. It's not non-human intelligence. So, I don't think it's far-fetched that some of these drones could be an attempt for the phenomenon just to keep the social engineering going, like they have. Because if you go back 70, 80 years, what is the statistical probability that there's never going to be a civilian that's going to get that smoking gun evidence that cannot be denied? Now, the skeptic will say the reason that doesn't exist is because there are no UFOs, but I would disagree. I would say there's too many patterns that have been solidified over the years, shapes, patterns in terms of like disparate people having the exact same kind of experiences in terms of like encounters, poltergeist experiences. There's people that don't know each other saying the same thing happens. So I'm very confident there is a phenomenon here, but I'm also very suspicious that there's social engineering on some level. Whenever they crash, why don't they crash in a city? Why don't they crash in Central Park? It's almost like they're doing something very intentionally that comes down to social engineering. And for anyone in the UFO community to say, oh, that's too far-fetched, we really can't go there. Hello, there's telepathy, there's sightings of aliens frolicking in flower patches, there's abduction stories, there's reports of making deals with the entities themselves, and sometimes entities have been reported to be violent. You can go on and on. We're dealing with an extraordinarily weird phenomenon. So for anyone to say, oh, I believe in the UFO subject, but the mimicry thing, nah, that's a bridge too far. I mean, come on, really? That doesn't make any sense.
I like to point out a lot when the UFO community is wrong, because I'm a jerk, and I have to do that. In this case, I think I can point out that the UFO community is correct, where they've been saying, at least since 2017, that the United States doesn't have control over their airspace. Whether the drones are UFOs or not, it's a big deal. I mean, terrorism with drones is everyday life in the Middle East and in Europe. It's only going to take one time in America for everyone to just really go crazy with it and be super scared. And then that's a horrible situation. But I can definitely see that occurring. But yeah, the UFO community has been right. We don't have control of our airspace, and this kind of highlights that better than ever.
You could say this, if China is not flying drones over our military bases now, they sure as hell can do it in the future, because we've demonstrated, A, we're not going to shoot them down, and B, we don't even consider it a threat anymore. So I think our foreign adversaries have seen a very distinct chink in our armor. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think history is on the side of like what Ryan is saying, which is it, and what you said, George, the mimicry thing. When we look at the history of overflight of nuclear facilities, and you look at what we're calling drones, you can go all the way back to the 50s. I mean, I found news clippings and everything. Sometimes there's red and green lights. Sometimes they just shut off and disappear and cloak. So history's on your side. If you look back at before there were any civilian drones in the air, there were objects coming over our infrastructure and toying with us. And sometimes they do look more conventional, and you get reports from people say that it changed, that it looked one way and it morphed. There's a great story out of a newspaper where some pilots were up in the air and all like 50 people saw this anamorphous thing moving with 6 other objects around it. So I just think history shows us, if we look at our newspaper articles from back in the day, this is something that's been occurring for a long time. It kind of looks like, something we have, but not quite. That goes back to the 1800s, as you guys know, your UFO history hats put them on. The idea that we have rituals. This was something that was happening back then. So if this phenomenon is what we seem to all expect, that it's some sort of conditioning program, or information program. That it's some sort of, like, I don't know the words you used, Ryan, but something like that is conditioning. Are we now conditioned to, is this still happening? Like this week, the last few days, over Christmas, did they also take off Christmas like they took off Thanksgiving? Were there drones over New Jersey area on Christmas? Do you guys know?
I saw one report from the Senate, and I didn't look beyond that, saying they're still here, we're still seeing objects. It seems like it's definitely winding down a bit, just like every other drone case that we've seen. It just stops.
Right. That's what I've heard as well from people. So there's internal comms within these infrastructure facilities, right? There's internal communications, and there seems to be a tapering off. So it's as if it's just going to stop, and then we've been conditioned again, and then we're just going to wake up after the New Year and go, well, that was weird.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. So, this idea that these things are not a threat, it's not just about drones. That's what our U.S. military, U.S. government has said about UFOs in general. That's the excuse they use for killing Project Blue Book. These are not a threat to national security. Let's move on. They've said that pretty much every step of the way.
information coming toward this hearing, and Burchett told the truth. You could hear him say it into the mic, whistleblowers plural, that I brought people in. So here we are, and I'm like, I can't just like give you guys a bunch of names that George and I protect these names. One of them for me since 2011. So I'm like, here's the deal. The deal is we need a subpoena. Let's just try one. You said you're willing to do it. I was talking directly with everybody organizing this, and they're like, well, you got to give us a name. I don't know it works that way. So I got a lawyer who's really good, haven't announced who he is. But how about this? Here are the fundamentals. Write that up. Give it to me. I'll get my lawyer. My lawyer will fill in that name because it's agreed on all sides, all parties. And it was a dead drop from that point. They never intended to do that. That's my perspective, at least. You know, I could be wrong, but the subpoena never was even touched after that. Did they really want first-hand whistleblowers? My determination is no, they did not. They wanted to find out who they were, but they didn't want to let them talk because it's uncontrolled. If George had talked, if I had talked, we have never been government employees. We have no NDAs. We can tell it like it is. And I think that would have been terrifying to the people trying to shape the emerging UAP narrative. And that is what people are trying to do. Agencies are trying to do. Even Tim Burchett said he was pulled aside in the middle of the hearing and said not to say my name. Around it. Just listen to him. He told you that the suits pulled him aside. You can see when he has to leave Congress. I was sitting there texting with him and watched him have to go out and talk to suits, agency people. So there's a lot of fuckery going on, Joe.
What's really weird about this is that always hear stories in the UFO community about the government getting involved, bad guys doing bad things. But this seems to be like almost an instance where we can actually point to it and maybe even actually prove it. You've been around a really long time, Joe, and I think you've probably seen other instances of this that I don't even know about. But this has to be one of the biggest times where we can actually look at it and then kind of dive into it. And I'm looking forward to what you guys have to say about it.
Yeah, there's a lot coming. There's a unique opportunity for Jeremy to document it in real time how this went down. And I think people are really going to pay attention to it when it happens. Ryan, let's get your take on the congressional hearing, including Immaculate Constellation, to document what came forward on that, and then Danny, you do the same thing.
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say is that Kirsten Gillibrand, when she was opening the hearing, she talked about things she was looking forward to getting debunked, and she referenced the Go Fast video, and she explicitly said that is among the things that are going to get debunked. So I'm assuming she got some kind of memo that was what Kozlowski was going to cover as something debunked. The reason I specify that is because Kozlowski didn't explicitly say we're debunking the Go Fast, but Gillibrand set it up as if that was what he was going to do. And Kozlowski, he didn't talk about what former Lieutenant Ryan Graves brought up, was that there was actually 4 UAP during the Go Fast incident, and they were line abreast, 1 mile apart. So how is Kozlowski saying, oh, it's just a balloon, guys, and yet then we have Graves come forward and say, wait a minute, did you actually speak to the pilot? Why did you not speak to the pilot if you really are trying to get to the truth? And you know, Graves was like, really what Arrow is trying to do is they're trying to find technicalities. They're not really trying to get to the truth. And I found it extremely irritating because there's no excuse for it. He's the head of Arrow. Why would he not have access to the information about the reported 5 UAP 1 mile apart line abreast? Well, Ryan Graves, who's not even in the government right now, knows all about it, knows the pilot. It's transparent that Arrow is really not trying to get to the bottom of this. They are, in my opinion, I hate to say it, I think they're just a disinformation activity. They're just trying to stall, and they're trying to make it appear like they're trying to get to the truth, but really they're just trying to gaslight the public and make it sound like, well, we never really know. It could be this, it could be that. No, they know. They're lying to us. Now, I don't know if Kozlowski knows. I don't know what he's been read into, but it doesn't matter whether he knows or not. He's being used in bad faith. He's not getting the information he needs. As far as Immaculate Constellation, that was absolutely fascinating, and I know that Well, yeah, it was fascinating, and the idea that the U.S. government has much better data. Well, that's been something whistleblowers and people coming forward have been saying for decades, and now we have a document that purports that clear 4K video, the drones that are escorting. No, UAP that are escorting drones out of some kind of wherever their flight pattern is. It's like, okay, why can't we see that? I'll bring this up. Chris Mellon has gone on the record saying that he's seen high fidelity satellite imagery. Why hasn't Congress seen that? In fact, in the July 26th hearing with David Grush brought that up. He said this fairly explicitly. He said, I've seen satellite images that with a physics degree I can't explain, and I have no idea why Congress has not seen it. Well, I'll tell you why Congress has not seen that satellite imagery. Because the DoD doesn't want Congress to see that satellite imagery, because once the DoD sees that satellite imagery, they'll know that they'll have greater verification that the DoD has been lying to Congress for decades. It's quite obvious, but I'll leave it at that.
The two sides of Kozlowski, I agree with Ryan said. I mean, maybe he's being told to say that, but then he goes on and talks about three unidentified cases, and one of them was like right out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was like when this guy got closer to this object, there was an orange orb, then it turned into a blacker than black object the size of a Prius, tilted at 45 degrees angle, which Danny has written about before. That's historical. They tilt up. Shot straight up in the air 10 to 100 times faster than any drone this law enforcement officer had seen. No noise, and then it emitted these very bright red and blue lights that illuminated the inside of his vehicle. So there's that side of Kozlowski. So it's like maybe he's being told to tell about the Go Fest, but then he sneaks in his own stuff. I think and he also has spoken about I was going to say, go ahead. I drew a blank.
Yeah, or he's baiting for people to come forward. Look, I'm not gonna say that if the guy is working, if he can't comb his hair, part his hair without the DoD saying he can, like you had said earlier, then it's not a good faith position. I would quit that job right away if they put me in, Operation Blue Box. Okay, I will tell you this: that footage. I don't know what Chris Mellon said. That's great. He's seen something. George and I are reporters, and people send us stuff. He and I can both attest. We have seen high fidelity of things that are so egregiously bizarre, you guys. I'll just admit it. We have been exposed to every type of footage you can imagine. Every type. Lots of it. And this has happened for a while, and I don't know what to do. I mean, as a journalist, we are able to be exposed to these things, and they're, it's shocking. There's a lot of footage. There's a lot of footage from this aggregate program called Immaculate Constellation, and not even within that program. That program was just siphoning off. Can I explain this real quick, what that was, you guys? Yeah. Here's the deal. Our sensor platforms, from space to air to sea to undersea, pick up all the time highly anomalous things that are unambiguously UAP. That's fact. I can attest to that as a human being sitting in front of you, that George and I have been exposed to it. I'm not going to go any further today, but that is fact. We have been. So what happens is you have our government saying all of this reporting is coming in and it's going up on these classified servers, but what do we do with it? What do we do with it? So they've developed one of many programs that used to be called Immaculate Constellation, where they will pull the best of the best, a lot of it using AI, and they will pull these